On January 26, 2026, under the unforgiving sun of the Arabian Sea, a massive steel giant cuts through the heat haze. This is the USS Abraham Lincoln, a floating city of 97,000 tons. But in the eyes of the enemy, she is just one thing: a massive, high-value target sitting on the open water. Tensions in the Middle East have just hit a boiling point we haven't seen in decades. Officials confirm the Lincoln has entered the region to counter specific imminent threats. But look closer at the water surrounding this nuclear leviathan. She is not alone in these hostile waters. Cutting through the waves alongside her are the greyhounds of the fleet, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers bristling with missiles and radar. Usually, a carrier travels with 3 or 4 of these bodyguards. But right now, the Navy is stacking them up, adding more holes to the screen. Why is the Pentagon rushing so many destroyers to the Lincoln side right now? Is it a show of force? Or are they expecting a massive saturation attack? The answer lies in a terrifying evolution of modern naval warfare. Welcome to the danger zone of 2026. Hi everyone, welcome back to Navy Power. I'm your host, and today we are breaking down a critical situation in the Middle East. We are talking about the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. Specifically, we are focusing on the shotgun ships protecting her. In naval terms, the carrier is the High Value Unit, or HVU. She brings the offensive power with her air wing of F-35s and Super Hornets. But a carrier is surprisingly vulnerable without her screen. That is where the Destroyer Squadron, or DESRON, comes into play. Following the chaos in the Red Sea over the last 2 years, the Navy learned that 1 or 2 destroyers simply isn't enough anymore. The threat of drone swarms and anti-ship ballistic missiles has changed the math. So, when the Lincoln crossed into the CENTCOM area of operations on January 26th, she brought heavy reinforcements with her. Today, we are going to decode the specific capabilities of these extra destroyers. We will look at why magazine depth is the new buzzword in the Pentagon. And we will explain how a networked wall of steel protects 5,000 sailors from instant destruction. If you want to understand the chess game playing out in the Arabian Sea, you need to understand the destroyer. Let's get into it. To understand the deployment, we first have to look at the battlefield. The waters around the Arabian Peninsula have become a shooter's gallery. This is not the open ocean warfare the Navy trained for in the Cold War. This is literal combat, fighting in tight, congested waterways. The primary threat to the Lincoln isn't another fleet of ships. It is an asymmetric mix of cheap drones and advanced ballistic missiles. We saw the prelude to this back in the Red Sea crisis of 2024. Rebel groups began using Iranian-designed one-way attack drones. These flying mopeds cost maybe $20,000 to build, but they can mission kill a multi-billion-dollar warship if they get through. In 2026, the tactics have evolved into what we call saturation attacks. Imagine 50 drones and cruise missiles launching simultaneously. They come from different azimuths, converging on the carrier at the same time. This is the nightmare scenario for a Combat Information Center, or CIC. The radar operators have seconds to identify, track, and assign a weapon to each threat. If you miss just one, that is a bad day for the Lincoln. Now, the USS Abraham Lincoln does have her own self-defense systems. She carries Sea Sparrow missiles and the Phalanx close-in weapon system. But here is the golden rule of air defense. You never want to fight the arrow when it is hitting your shield. You want to kill the arrow miles away, or better yet, kill the archer. If a carrier is using her own guns, something has gone terribly wrong. This brings us to the critical concept of magazine depth. This is the main reason why the Navy is stacking destroyers right now. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is a bottomless pit of firepower, theoretically. But in reality, it has a hard limit. Depending on the flight version, a destroyer has roughly 90 to 96 VLS cells. These are the vertical tubes that hold the interceptor missiles. In a saturation attack, a ship might fire 4 or 5 missiles in a minute. Do the math, and you realize the silo runs dry terrifyingly fast. And here is the logistics kicker that keeps admirals up at night. These destroyers cannot reload their VLS cells while at sea. It requires a calm harbor and a massive crane to load these heavy canisters. Once a destroyer is empty, it is just a floating radar station with a 5-inch gun. It has to leave the fight and transit days to a safe port to reload. That leaves a hole in the carrier's defensive screen. By adding more destroyers to the Lincoln's group, the Navy is buying insurance. They are creating a deeper magazine to outlast the enemy's stockpile. If one ship runs low, another steps up to take the shot. It is a rotating wall of steel designed to never break. But having the missiles is only half the battle. You need the eyes to see the threat coming. That is where the spy radar system comes in. Meet the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the workhorse of the U.S. Navy. Sailors call these ships Greyhounds because they are fast and agile. But in a carrier strike group, they earn the nickname Shotgun. Their job is to ride next to the carrier and blast anything that gets too close. The heart of this beast is not its missiles, but its brain. It is called the Aegis combat system, the most advanced naval weapon system ever built. If you look at the deckhouse of a destroyer, you will see 4 octagonal plates. That is the spy radar, the eyes of the fleet. Unlike old radars that spin around mechanically to scan the horizon, the spy radar is a phased array system that does not move. It sends out beams of electromagnetic energy electronically in all directions at once. It can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, from sea-skimming missiles to satellites in space. This brings us to why having more destroyers around the Lincoln changes the game. It is a concept called Cooperative Engagement Capability, or CEC. In the old days, a ship could only shoot at what its own radar could see. But in 2026, all these destroyers are linked into a single, massive data network. Imagine Destroyer A is positioned 20 miles ahead of the Lincoln. It picks up a low-flying Houthi cruise missile on its radar. Destroyer B, positioned near the carrier, might not see the missile yet due to the curvature of the Earth. But through the network, Destroyer B sees exactly what Destroyer A sees in real time. Destroyer B can actually launch a missile to intercept a target it cannot even see physically. This turns the strike group from a collection of individual ships into a distributed weapon system. The more destroyers you add to the network, the wider your view becomes. You are effectively pushing the defensive perimeter hundreds of miles outward. This gives the commanders on the Lincoln more time to make life or death decisions. And in naval combat, time is the only luxury you cannot buy. But detecting the threat is one thing, destroying it is another. The destroyers use a layered defense strategy, like peeling an onion. At long range, they use the Standard Missile 2 or the newer SM-6. These are interceptors capable of hitting targets over 90 miles away. If a threat slips through that outer layer, it faces the evolved Sea Sparrow missile. And if it gets past that, into the last-ditch zone inside 5 miles, the ship unleashes the 5-inch gun and the Phalanx CIWS. The Phalanx is a computer-controlled Gatling gun that fires 4,500 rounds per minute. It creates a wall of tungsten designed to shred the incoming missile. But remember, every engagement costs millions of dollars in munitions. An SM-2 missile costs over $2 million. The drones they are shooting down might cost less than a Honda Civic. This cost asymmetry is a huge strategic problem for the U.S. Navy. And it is another reason why they need more ships and more magazines in the region. They are trying to ensure they don't run out of bullets before the enemy runs out of drones. But there is a new player on the board in 2026 that changes the equation again. Some of these destroyers are now equipped with directed energy weapons. We are talking about lasers and high-power microwaves. Let's decode how these sci-fi weapons are finally becoming reality on the front lines. We mentioned the cost problem earlier. A $2 million missile versus a cheap drone. The Navy's answer is something that looks like it belongs in Star Wars. Enter the ODIN system, or optical dazzling interdictor, Navy. Unlike a kinetic gun, ODIN shoots a beam of concentrated light. It is designed to dazzle or blind the optical sensors of enemy drones. If a drone cannot see, it cannot target the ship, and it crashes. Then there is Helios, a high-energy laser that can physically burn through metal. The strategic advantage here is what we call an infinite magazine. As long as the destroyer's generators are running, the laser can fire. And the cost per shot? It is roughly the price of a gallon of diesel fuel. This allows the destroyers to save their expensive SM-2 missiles for the big threats. But even with lasers and Aegis, the most critical component is biological. It is the 300 men and women living inside that steel box. We need to talk about the human toll of these extended deployments. Operating in the Red Sea or Arabian Sea in 2026 is exhausting. These crews are often working 18-hour days for months on end. When the ship enters a high-threat zone, the rhythm of life changes. You might be sleeping in your rack, finally getting a few hours of rest. Then the 1MC loudspeaker screams, "General quarters! General quarters! All hands, man your battle stations! Threat inbound!" Imagine the adrenaline spike, waking up from a dead sleep to prepare for combat. You have to put on your flash gear, fire-resistant gloves and hood. You rush to your station, not knowing if a missile is seconds away from impact. This is the psychological reality for the sailors protecting the Abraham Lincoln. The stress is constant because the enemy can strike at any time. And the person bearing the most weight is often the TAO. The Tactical Action Officer sits in the Dark Combat Information Center. They hold the battery's release key around their neck. They have the authority to launch weapons to defend the ship without asking the captain. In 2026, a TAO has mere seconds to decide if a blip is a threat or a civilian airliner. The pressure to be perfect every single time is crushing. One mistake could mean an international incident or the loss of the ship. That is why the Navy is rotating these destroyers in and out. They are not just managing fuel and ammo, they are managing human endurance. A tired crew makes mistakes, and in this environment, mistakes are fatal. The additional destroyers allow commanders to rotate ships off the front line, giving the crews a chance to sleep, repair gear, and decompress. It is a logistical ballet that keeps the defensive shield strong 24/7. But what happens if that shield actually fails? What is the worst-case scenario if a leaker gets through to the Lincoln? We need to talk about damage control and the resilience of a carrier. Because in war, you have to assume that eventually you will take a hit. So why is the Navy stacking destroyers around the USS Abraham Lincoln in 2026? It goes deeper than just missile counts. We are witnessing a historic pivot in maritime strategy. For decades, the carrier was the undisputed queen of the ocean, projecting power inland. But today, in the narrow choke points of the Middle East, the game is about sea control. The threat has fundamentally changed from singular targets to mass saturation. The extra destroyers provide the magazine depth needed to hold that line. They create a networked shield that pushes the danger zone far away from the carrier, allowing the air wing to safely launch their jets. But beyond the tactics, there is a bigger picture here. These ships are not just protecting a carrier, they are protecting the lifeline of the global economy. 90% of the world's trade travels by sea. We are talking about the energy that powers your home and the components inside your smartphone. When vital arteries like the Strait of Hormuz are threatened, the entire global system feels the shock. Prices rise, supply chains break, and instability spreads. The sailors on those destroyers are the only thing standing between order and chaos. They are the unsung guardians, living in a steel box, ready to fire at a moment's notice. It is a dangerous, exhausting, and often thankless job. They miss birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays, standing watch in the dark so the rest of the world can sleep in peace. But as long as the Abraham Lincoln is on patrol, she will never be alone. she will always have her shotguns, riding shotgun. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the aircraft carrier is becoming obsolete in the age of drones? Or does this new destroyer strategy prove that the carrier strike group is still king? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read as many as I can. If you enjoyed this deep dive into naval tactics, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Navy Power for more stories from the fleet. We have a video coming up next week, continuing our deep dive into these floating fortresses. We will be analyzing the future of naval aviation and the new secret technologies that will keep these carriers dominant for the next 50 years. You definitely don't want to miss that one. Until next time, fair winds and following seas. Stay safe out there.